Hello and welcome to Penglis Online News. This is news from a conservative, libertarian perspective. All issues and topics covered will have that clear point of view. The goal of Penglis Online News, as always, is to inspire new ideas, invent new terms and new language, to give you new ways of looking at and thinking about the news, and finally to redirect the national debate to a conservative advantage. Welcome now to Penglis Online News. What is not in the news is as important as what is in the news, for the real bias is what is not covered. For example, Syria, which was so demonized a few short weeks ago, doesn't rate a mention today. Why? Because the purpose of getting upset over chemical weapons had nothing to do with chemical weapons, and everything to do with getting past the one-year anniversary of the murders of our people in Benghazi, without a single question as to where the president was that night and why he did nothing to help our ambassador and those with him. With that accomplished, Syria and Assad now drop off the news radar screen. What is the biggest lie being told today? The biggest lie is that, quote, Congress must raise the debt ceiling before the October 17th deadline, when the nation is expected to exhaust its borrowing authority. If it does not, the United States would default for the first time in history, unquote. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Yet this is the line carried by almost every news organization in the country today. The national debt is the total amount that Congress has borrowed and not paid back since the nation was debt-free. And that, according to an NPR radio editorial by Robert Smith, was when Andrew Jackson paid off the national debt January 8th, 1835. There are three options for Congress when the debt ceiling is reached October 17th, and none of the, quote, extraordinary measures covered in my last broadcast will work anymore. The options are, 1, raise the debt ceiling. 2, leave the debt ceiling where it is, or 3, lower the debt ceiling. The first option, increasing the debt ceiling, is economic suicide. The current, staggering national debt is easy to see at usdebtclock.org. The debt, if allowed to continue growing, will consume the economy and break the nation. This is the course desired by the Democrats and the national media. This is the path the weak and cowardly Republicans will probably capitulate to after getting some tokens from the president. The second option, leaving the debt ceiling where it is, isn't even being considered. However, it could be accomplished by simply halting the borrowing and cutting spending enough to stay within the current debt ceiling. That is the purpose of having a debt ceiling. According to Representative David Schweikert, the federal government is forecast to take in $3 trillion in 2014, but plans to spend $3.6 trillion. So, to stay within the current debt ceiling, all Congress has to do is cut $600 billion over 2014. Regarding the lie of default, the government only defaults when it fails to pay the interest on the national debt. Representative Schweiker reports it is, quote, mathematically impossible to default, unquote, because the government takes in 18% of gross domestic product in payments, but spends only 2% of GDP on debt coverage. The third option is to lower the debt ceiling. This is the only option that makes any sense and which leads to economic prosperity. This has been suggested by just one congressman, and that was 2 years ago. John Parkinson of ABC News reports that Representative Paul Braun, a medical doctor, introduced the Debt Ceiling Reduction Act to force Congress to start paying off the national debt and drastically cut spending. It would have reduced the debt ceiling from the past $14.3 trillion ceiling down to $13 trillion. At the time, there were no co-sponsors for the legislation, nor plans from House leadership to bring it up for a vote. Now the national debt is almost $17 trillion. So, how can the debt ceiling be lowered? Mark Thornton of the Ludwig von Mises Institute states that lowering the debt ceiling could be paid for by cutting back on federal regulatory drags on the economy, selling some of the 75,000 currently unused federal buildings and giving some 400 million acres of land, plus most of Alaska, back to the states to manage. From the National Center for Constitutional Studies, on their 101 questions to ask candidates, comes a list of agencies not authorized by the Constitution. Agencies to abolish include the EPA, OSHA, the Federal Communications Commission, Food and Drug Administration, hundreds of government businesses, departments of energy, health and human services, and education. The National Center reports that about 1/3 of the federal budget is spent on unconstitutional activities. So the real question to be asked by all the nation's news agency is not how much to raise the debt ceiling to avoid default, but how much to lower the debt ceiling to get back to economic prosperity. If allowed to continue, the Obama administration will raise the debt as far as possible to pay for more people to be dependent on government to create more Democrat voters. So the debt ceiling is in the way of Democrat Party recruiting. And that's the real reason Democrats want it continually raised without any limits. Penglis Online News is brought to you by The Complete Guide to Flight Instruction, which is my sarcastic and blunt critique of our flight training system and how to fix it. Also, if you want to learn to fly, if you want all the secrets, all the inside information, all the things that will really get you through the flight training system efficiently, quickly, and with all kinds of information you're not going to get from any other source, please consult The Complete Guide to Flight Instruction, available from Amazon.com. If ever the Second Amendment was needed, it was needed on the morning of September 16th, when 34-year-old Navy reservist Aaron Alexis randomly shot and killed 12 civilian contractors and injured 8 more, using a shotgun and a handgun at the Washington, D.C. Navy Yard. The yard had several layers of security, including armed security and guards, all of which were bypassed by Alexis. However, the real security that could have saved lives and injuries was denied, as it is to countless citizens all over the country, that being the constant carrying of personal firearms. Gun-free zones for citizens and military personnel and other severe gun restrictions in violation of strict Second Amendment rights remove even the possibility of an effective defense in an emergency or violent confrontation such as this, and are responsible for many needless deaths. It is the ultimate irony that those in the military or those working on military bases who swear to defend our constitutional rights, maybe even give their lives in that defense, are prevented from exercising the very rights they swear to protect when those rights are most needed. This isn't the first time that a denial of rights has cost lives. At Fort Hood, another terrorist took many lives without any chance of defense until local law enforcement arrived. So, how did we get here? The Blaze reports that in February 1992, a defense directive was first signed, which forbid the carrying or issuing of firearms for personal protection on military bases. This directive was signed again in 2011. Officer.com, by way of neocon.com, has a thread called, quote, "Let Soldiers Pack Heat on Post," which says that soldiers have never been able to carry personal firearms on base whenever they wanted. What has changed is not the policy so much, but the country. There was a time, not so long ago, when mass murder on base was unthinkable because of the loyalty and dedication of those who serve. That is not true anymore, as a rush to diversity has given us diversity of allegiance. In a planned reversal, the military has been disarmed domestically, but the police have been completely militarized. See my special report on the Second Amendment for more details. Whereas citizens and military personnel are not trusted with firearms in the normal course of life and work, the police are completely trusted and given more benefits of the doubt and more Second Amendment rights, even off-duty, than any regular citizen or military personnel. This is the Second Amendment in reverse, and establishes and exacerbates a huge misperception problem in the country today, which is at the root of the complete misconception of strict gun control. Part of the reason gun control laws are accepted, even though they are illegal, is that when people see a regular citizen with a gun, their first reaction is fear that the person is a criminal and that the police have to be called. Why don't we have the same reaction when we see a person driving a car? Cars are one of the greatest dangers causing death every day. Wouldn't we be really safer and feel safer if only the police drove cars? I'll be back with more. Contrast our previous story with this one. On October 3rd, an unarmed woman with a toddler in her car was shot and killed in front of her child after failing to stop the vehicle after it struck barricades outside a White House checkpoint. The controlled media celebrated, and the police proclaimed themselves heroes. The question is, why more questions were not immediately asked? Slowly, the investigation is starting. But the perception that police use of guns for defense or enforcement is good, and the open carrying of firearms by police is natural, is counter to a truly free country, where the carrying of firearms by any government person should be suspect, and the carrying of firearms openly or concealed by citizens should be completely natural, accepted, and even unnoticed. This indoctrinated misperception of who should and should not naturally carry firearms is what precedes the acceptance of gun-free zones where people die defenseless, and the acceptance of police to shoot an unarmed woman with a child on board where there is no immediate investigation by the complicit media. In truly reverse logic, the president stated in a speech the Sunday after the Navy Yard murders that gun laws are, quote, failing to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and dangerous people, unquote. Naturally, that's not why we have gun laws. Gun laws are to keep guns out of the hands of good, honest people. Where gun laws are really failing is that they prevent good people with their guns from places where they can save lives. The fallacy that more gun laws will stop dangerous people from getting and using guns is irrational, as murderers don't obey laws. And it is criminal laws, not gun laws, that punish criminals, or deter potential criminals. So again, the president has it wrong. Every mass shooting, except for the Giffords shooting, has taken place in a gun-free zone. Every mass shooting that has been stopped by good people with guns. The police can't be everywhere. Only armed citizens can be everywhere. Therefore, restrictive gun laws actually promote crime and crime conditions, which makes legislators, the judiciary, government agents, officers, governors, and even the president accessories and enablers to murder, as well as conspirators against constitutional self-defense rights. If it saves one life, it's worth getting rid of gun control laws. Or so the argument goes. Perception is everything. When will the current perception be reversed where citizens carrying guns, openly or concealed, at work or at play, be looked upon as desirable and not suspect? When will the citizen who carries a gun be admired as a guardian of freedom, rather than with fear that such a person must be a criminal or have criminal intent? When will gun-free zones be looked at as killing zones and not safe zones? Can the current indoctrination from education, entertainment, and societal perception be reversed to restore not just liberty, but the desire for liberty and the exercise and practice of liberty through the uninfringed exercise of the Second Amendment? Stay tuned as we investigate these very important questions. In my next broadcast of Penglis Online News, we'll report on the connection between mass public shootings and the rise of psychotropic drug use. In conclusion, Penglis Online News wants to be the first to congratulate Senator Ted Cruz for being the first Hispanic to lead a 21-hour filibuster. Since no one else will do it, we will. That's it for this edition of Penglis Online News. This is Greg Penglis. Good day.